Wednesday afternoon at 3:30, as always, it's time to wrap with the Rev. That would be Tim Radkey, pastor at Hosanna Lutheran Church here in Kerrville. I'm a member of the church. My name is Ted Davis, and we're going to dive into the Old Testament today, which is interesting. But let me tell you a little bit about the church. We are a Missouri-centered Lutheran church located on Highway 16 south of town at Camp Meeting Road. 134 Camp Meeting Road is our actual address. We have two services on Sunday. 8:30 is a traditional service with the hymns and the organ and the pastor in the robes. And then at 11 o'clock, we have a contemporary service with a praise band led by Misty Dawn, who you hear here in the mornings on Encore Radio and at encoreradio.net. And if you're looking for a church home or just want to check us out, we love to have visitors. We're very friendly. We don't overwhelm you. We welcome you, and we hope you enjoy the service. And check us out. Again, that's at 8:30 on Sunday and 11 on Sunday, and all of our services are available online, and they're also archived online. Correct, Pastor Tim?
Correct. And also know if you're visiting, we won't make you stand up or put a fluorescent T-shirt on you to identify you. So you will be greeted and welcomed, but that's where it ends. No public call out to visitors. So.
We are so friendly that if you come into the church and sit in my seat, you know how Lutherans are, we all sit in the same spot, I won't say anything to you.
Yeah.
I'll go sit somewhere else.
I mean, basically, it's really like walking into Cheers. I mean, that's what it is.
Old Testament, you are now starting. By the way, between services, Pastor Tim teaches a Bible study class. It starts about 9:45 and goes until 10:30. And you just started a 4-week series on Joseph of the multicolored robe.
Yes.
And so you mentioned that a lot of churches say they're a New Testament church, and that you miss a whole big chunk of what happened if you don't go back to the Old Testament, right?
Yeah, you really do. We have the division because we hear really instead of maybe Testament, it might be easier to understand it if you think of Old Covenant, New Covenant, and the New Covenant that Jesus makes. But the New Covenant is really helping us to better understand the Old Testament in the sense that the Old Testament is the cradle that holds the promise of the Christ child. It's the manger, if you will. And so Christ doesn't replace the Old Testament as if it's of no use. He fulfills it. And so it's really one story almost broken into kind of two covenant periods of time. Now, there's more than one covenant in the Old Testament, but that's how we often think about it. And so it's really hard to see the beauty of the New Testament if the Old Testament doesn't cast light on it. And it's the same in reverse, is the Old Testament makes a lot more sense, no pun intended, in light of the New Testament, in light of Jesus Christ, who is the light of the world. So you have to have both. Really understand it.
It predicted the whole thing, didn't it?
Sure,
yeah. There are prophecies in the Old Testament that lead directly to what happened in the New Testament.
And without this understanding, good point, Ted, I didn't even think about that, but why that's helpful is you don't misinterpret those prophecies today, which often happens in some Christian circles. You know, they'll read Daniel and say, "Oh, this is what's going on in Iran and Jordan right now," you know, and they'll kind of apply these modern day fulfillments to these Old Testament prophecies, when in actuality, those promises either spoke to being fulfilled, those prophecies fulfilled in Christ, or in the eschaton, which is the end times, the final time. So it's not this roadmap to understand current events happening in the Middle East, okay? Although many will kind of take that interpretation. But that's an example of you've cut the string between the old and the new, and now you're just trying to kind of fit some of these prophecies into modern day interpretation. So
we're going to go back to Genesis, the very beginning of the whole thing. And we're going to skip all the begetting part because there's a lot of begetting. Everybody was begetting.
Everyone was begetting.
So
they were being fruitful. That's the only commandment that we've always followed. that the Lord gave.
Yeah, they were begetting like crazy back then. But we're going to go to chapter 37, and this is about Joseph, he of the fancy robe.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to start with 37, and this is what we did on Sunday, so I'll read the opening part here. Jacob, that would be Joseph's father, correct? Is that
correct?
Okay. Jacob lived in the land where his father had stayed, the land of Canaan. This is the account of Jacob's family line. Joseph, a young man of 17, was tending the flocks with his brothers, the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives, and he brought their father a bad report about them. Now, Israel, that also is Jacob, right?
Yes, correct.
Okay, now why Israel?
So Jacob has this dream, and he wrestles with God and refuses to let him go until he blesses him. And in that wrestling, he dislocates his hip, and he'll forever walk with a limp after that encounter. And it's also the time at which Jesus, or God, Yahweh, changes the name of Jacob to Israel.
Okay.
And so he's the father of the 12 tribes of the nation of Israel. And Israel means, in the Hebrew, wrestles with God. And so this will become the embodiment and reference point, if you will, for all of Israel. So as you read this Old Testament and the law of Moses and the people's sins and all this, you're going to see they fulfill their name as a nation that wrestles with God.
I never knew that
Right?
was the case. See, you learned something here.
Yeah, you do.
We're edumacating you is what we're doing here. So now Israel, that would be Joseph's father,
Jacob, yep.
loved Joseph more than any of his other sons because he had been born to him in his old age, and he made an ornate robe for him. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word about him.
All right. Now, this is some good stuff here. And it says the reason why he loved him more than the others is because he was born to him at an old age. And I would say it's far more than that for Jacob, because we've got to go back a little bit in Genesis to understand, how does Jacob get many wives, right? And you have to go back to the moment that Jacob and his brother Esau are born, right? And you might also notice Esau was the oldest, and they're twins.
Okay.
And at the birth, it's noted that Jacob is grabbing onto the heel of Esau at the actual birth.
Okay.
So he's actually even wrestling at that point because he's going to be the second child born, right? In this era, all the rights and all the benefits go to the firstborn, right?
So he was trying to pull him back, and that's interesting.
From the womb, and even when she's pregnant, they say you have two nations wrestling inside of you. You know, a mom feels a baby move.
Yeah.
So those movements are indicative of something far deeper in the historical narrative. Okay, and we'll hit fast forward now. When Jacob and Esau's father is about to die, Jacob, because of his mom favored him over his older brother Esau, tells him to get his brother's blessing from the father, right? And so the funny story, Esau is a really hairy guy. Jacob wasn't. And so Jacob goes and puts animal skins on him. His brother's a hunter, and really his dad loved his son because he brought him wild game and fed his belly. And so mom prepares the food. Jacob dresses himself in animal skins. His father, who has lost his sight, gives the blessing he meant to give to Esau to Jacob. So Jacob steals the blessing. And it's one of these weird things, like it can't be reversed. Once the blessing's spoken, it's spoken. And so when Esau finds out about it, he wants to kill his brother, because he's stolen it, and he basically sold his birthright for food, and so Jacob ends up having to flee, and he goes to 10 flocks somewhere else, and he meets a woman at a well named Rachel, who he loves deeply, and has to work 5 years, I think it is, to marry her. And then Rachel's father pulls a fast one on Jacob on the wedding night and throws in Leah, the older daughter, into the tent. And so,
well, it was dark, and
and so then Jacob has to work another 5 years to get Rachel, and so now Jacob is the one who's duped and tricked, and he has to work more to get his wife Rachel, the one in whom he really loved. And the dad's logic was, I can't marry off the younger daughter before the older, so you got to take them both. So this is the long story behind Joseph is born to Rachel, the wife that he loved.
The favorite wife. So he has a favorite son and a favorite wife.
Yeah.
And he's also the 11th son, right? So all of these older brothers are kind of ticked off that he's the favorite anyway. When I hear people say the Bible is boring.
Yeah, and it's clean, and it's always neat.
You got to be kidding me.
No, listen to this. It's even worse if you want. So here's the thing. Jacob, this is the birth order of the 12 sons of Jacob and Israel that become the 12 tribes. Reuben is born to Leah, right? That's the first wife that when he's duped that he gets, Rachel's sister. Then Simeon is born to Leah. Then Levi is born to Leah. Then Judah, who will also be the line and tribe that Jesus comes from, is born to Leah. And then Rachel's so upset that she's not bearing him any children, she gives her servant Bilhah to Jacob to sleep with. And to Bilhah is born Dan. And then Naphtali is born to Bilhah. And then that makes Leah mad, so Leah gives her servant girl to sleep with Jacob. And then Zilpah gives birth to Gad. Zilpah gives birth to Asher. And then Leah has a couple more kids, Issachar and Zebulun. And then the last two born are finally born to Rachel, and the 11th is Joseph, and the 12th is Benjamin.
You remember when they had the nighttime soap operas Dallas and Dynasty?
Yes.
This could be that.
Oh yeah, this is like whatever they are, Days of Our Lives, As the World Turns. I mean, to say that this is not a crazy beginning to the 12 tribes is an understatement.
So Joseph is the favorite, and the brothers hated him. You can imagine that. Jealousy comes into play here. Envy comes into play here. All the human emotions that we have. And Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. He said to them, "Listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it." His brothers said to him, "Do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us?" And they hated him all the more because of his dream and what he had said.
Yeah, and this is where Joseph begins his "I have a dream" speech, right?
Yes.
If you will. And Joseph was evidently not educated in not all things that happen to you should be shared with others.
Especially
right?
your brothers.
Especially your brothers, who already in verse 4, because of the favoritism of the father toward him, hate him, right? And now he's like, "Hey bros, I had this dream," right? And the craziest thing happened is there were these sheaves, and mine was upright, and 11 bowed to this sheaf, right?
Yeah.
And the brothers have their mind blown, like, "Oh my gosh, are you now telling us as the 11th born son that we are going to bow to you?" right?
Yeah.
And so this just only deepens the resentment and the hatement, that's not a word, the hate of the brothers toward Joseph.
Tim Radkey, pastor at Hosanna Lutheran Church here in Kerrville. We're diving into the Old Testament, Genesis. So Joseph, having had one dream, not well received by his brothers, doesn't really get it. So verse 9, then Joseph had another dream, and he told it to his brothers. Listen, he said, I had another dream, and this time the sun and the moon and the 11 stars were bowing down to me. When he told his father as well as his brothers, his father rebuked him and said, what is this dream you had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you? His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. So what does that mean, kept the matter in mind?
Yeah, so my translation said, he dreamed another dream, which I like that. So dream number 2, similar to dream number 1, with the exception of now his mother and father will also be bowing down to him along with the 11 brothers.
Because apparently the entire universe is now his, this moon and the stars and everything else.
Yeah, it's as if he will be Lord over the entire family, right? And so the brothers are jealous. So, right, hatred is often rooted in jealousy. There's this kind of symbiotic relationship between jealousy and hatred. If you go back to Cain and Abel, you realize the jealousy and the hatred that Cain had for Abel because God favored Abel's sacrifice over Cain's. God warns Cain and says, look, sin is crouching at the door and it desires to devour you if you don't get a hold of it. And he doesn't, and he kills his brother Abel. Right, and there's that whole story of the blood of Abel cries out to God for vengeance, right? And so the brothers are certainly at a tipping point in terms of what they're thinking and the hatred they have internally externalizing itself into some action against their brother, potentially, okay? And then Jacob treasures these things in his mind, right? What does this mean? Well, Jacob seems to know that these dreams have something to do with God and his son Joseph. He doesn't know the outcome of it. He's not sure how the story will turn and what that will mean, what it will look like. But he just wants to think about it and ponder, what could this look like? What does this mean? What's the significance of these dreams? And how I can't think of a world where David's in a position that we would bow to him, right? And so he just places it in his heart to think, right? And Mary did this. We see that in the New Testament. You know, Mary hears these things from the angel Gabriel, and she treasures them in her heart, right? Which is a way of saying, I need to think about this. I don't comprehend and understand the totality of what I've just received, right?
So we move on forward here. I'm going to skip a little bit for time, but Joseph is sent by the father to go look for his brothers who are out tending the sheep, which is interesting because Joseph is not out tending the sheep.
Right.
He's the favorite, right?
Yeah.
So he doesn't have to work.
He's probably finishing breakfast that mom made for him.
So he goes out and he's looking for his brothers. He can't find them. He runs into a stranger, says, well, they've gone to another part because they're grazing in another part. So Joseph went after his brothers and found them near Dothan. But they saw him in the distance, and before he reached them, they plotted to kill him. Here comes that dreamer, they said to each other. Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dream. So now we've gotten to the point where they're just going to take him out.
Yeah, now there's a plot. And this is interesting, is the brothers are thought to be in Shechem, right?
Yeah.
And the guy he meets as he's wandering around the fields, also kind of proof that he doesn't walk those fields too often. He hears that they're in Dothan, right? Or Dothan.
Dothan, yeah.
And this is interesting. Dothan is north of Shechem, and it's a major trade route, right? So if Joseph had found his brothers in Shechem, there would be no caravanners coming by eventually to potentially sell their brother off to. But we're getting a little bit ahead on the story. But the brothers plot, right? This is our opportunity to take him out.
We can make it look like an animal got him.
Yeah, wild animal got him, which is not unheard of in those times. You remember young King David, before he was King David, when he comes to check on his brothers and Goliath is across the field, he mentions to King Saul that, hey, I'll fight him. And they're like, well, you're just a young boy. He's like, yeah, but I've killed bears and lions with my own hands when they attack the flock. And so you have this similar plot against Joseph as he gets into Dothan, and they think they've got it perfectly worked out.
Okay, now
put
one
some
of
blood on there, and
and make it look like it was an accident. One of his brothers, Reuben, when Reuben heard this, he tried to rescue him from their hands. Let's not take his life, he said. Don't shed any blood. Throw him into this cistern here in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him. Reuben said this to rescue him from them and take him back to his father. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the ornate robe he was wearing, and they took him and they threw him into the cistern. The cistern was empty. There was no water in it. And they then, the brothers, sat down, ate a meal. While sitting there, they looked up and saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. Their camels were loaded with spices, balm, and myrrh, and they were on their way to take them down to Egypt. Judah, one of his brothers, said, "What will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him after all. He is our brother, our own flesh and blood." His brothers agreed. Don't kill him, just sell him into slavery.
Yeah, and isn't it interesting that everybody's trying to get something from Joseph, right? Reuben, if you remember what we covered at the beginning, he's the firstborn son.
Yep.
Right? And his plan is leave him in the cistern, I'll go back home, I'll come back out, get Joseph, bring him to my father, and now my father's favor will fall upon me because I rescued his favorite son, right? So he's manipulating. Then Judah, the fourthborn, all their mothers, both of their mothers, Reuben and Leah's mother, or Leah is the mother of Reuben and Judah. And then Judah thinks, you know what? Let's just make some money off of them. We can make some money off of selling Joseph. And so that's what they determined to do, right? For a slave's price.
So this story goes on. Then they got Joseph's robe. They've sold him off to slavery. They got his robe, slaughtered a goat, dipped the robe in blood. They took the robe back to their father and said, "We found this. Examine it to see whether it's your son's robe." His father recognized it and said, "It's my son's robe. Some furious animal has devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces." Then Jacob tore his clothes, that's the father, put on sackcloth and mourned his son for many days. All of his sons and daughters came to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. "No," he said, "I will continue to mourn until I join my son in the grave." So his father wept for him. Meanwhile, the Midianites sold Joseph to Egypt, one of the Pharaoh officials who was the captain's guard. So this is how Joseph ends up as an aide to the Pharaoh.
Yes, that's how he gets to Egypt, right? And it's important to take a look at Joseph now, too, in light of all that's happened to him, right? He has these unique dreams that are from God, and yet it seems as if everything's going in the most horrific way for him. And at this point in the story, and in his life, like our lives, he can't see what God's doing in this. Right, he doesn't know where God's going to lead this road to end for him, right? And so he's really left with my only option is just to trust God, right? In light of the circumstances that are not desirable, it's not where I want to be. He's also now away from the love of his father and his mother and the comfort and familiarity of his own home, and he's gone. And, of course, as you read, we see the toll this takes on Jacob. There is no consolation for him, right? He tears his clothes. He puts on ashes, a normal symbol of mourning and grief and often repentance. And you got to think, now is Jacob blaming himself for having sent Joseph to check on his sons, right? And one thing we didn't cover, remember, we began earlier with a little earlier in the story, Joseph gave a bad report about his brothers, right? So he's kind of the tattletale, right? Also. And so it seems as if it's not uncommon for Joseph to be sent from the house and the air conditioning to the brothers to give a report on the father. So, yeah. And the big takeaway for us in the story, too, is when our life is chaotic and it seems as if nothing's making sense and one suffering's being replaced by another suffering, it is not a sign that God is not at work or with you in it, right? And that's something we have to understand, because you have this mentality today that all suffering's bad. If you're suffering or you experience loss, it must mean you ticked off God and God's not with you, right? The whole story of Job, all of Job's friends' advice were, Job, you brought this upon yourselves, which is not true. Though Joseph doesn't know what God's mind is at this time, and Job never learned that God wasn't displeased with him, that he was actually pleased with him, which led to Job's, attacks from the devil.
Again, never say the Bible is boring again.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard. Like, I have to slow down when I talk about these stories because there's so many turns and twists to try to remember, and then the names, and then the story before that, and what happened, and I mean, it's just crazy.
To show you how impactful the story has been, there was a Broadway production that ran for 10 years from 1982 to 1974 to 1982. It was called Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. And it was a Andrew Lloyd Webber musical, who is great. I've seen a couple of his plays on Broadway, but it ran for about 1,000 performances. And so this even became a Broadway play. Why not?
Yeah. It could be a really cool Netflix story now.
It could be.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, and you just see these patterns, right? Where God seems to bring about his plans in a way that's contrary to how we would have wanted him to bring his plans out.
Who would have picked King David?
Yeah, exactly. He's not the oldest of his family.
Right.
All of that. Leah was the spurned wife for Jacob, and yet she gives birth to Judah, and it's going to be Judah's line that is the Christ line.
So there you go.
Right?
The circle kind of completed.
Yeah. Jacob becomes the almost like the first son, even though Esau is born first, but he does it by cheating and conniving, right? And yet God still works his plan of salvation through all of these twists and through the sin of mankind.
And our lives are like that, aren't they?
We are.
Have twists and turns. We sin, but like you said, trust that God has a plan.
Yeah, and one thing we have that some of them didn't have at this time is now, since Christ has come and he has spoken and he has made promises, we know how it ends for us personally as believers in Jesus. And so, boy, in life, how often do we really just need to step back and say, look, I can't explain it. I don't enjoy where I'm at right now, but I know in the end it'll be for my good. Right? As Romans says, right? All things work together for the good of those who love God.
And believe me, when you watch the news these days, you need that reassurance.
Oh, yeah.
Because it looks like we're all just going to hell, basically.
Yeah. And I was in a Bible study this morning. One of the guys on the call said, if you just watch the news, you'll understand how everything's going in the devil's kingdom. Mm-hmm. And I thought, wow, that's a really telling statement. Yeah. Because he works division, right? Separation. That's what he does. Yeah. I mean, that's his work, is to, chiefly separate us from trusting and believing in God's goodness toward us. But he also works division in the world, right?
And he is busy.
Yes.
Right now.
Yeah.
He is
and he gets Christians through current events to begin thinking and acting and behaving unlike Christians should.
And doubting.
Right. And doubting.
And doubting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess God's not in control if this is happening in our
Right.
nation or whatever.
All right. Very interesting. We are out of time for this week. We'll be back next week with Rappin with Rev Rad, Tim Radkey, pastor of Hosanna Lutheran Church here in Kerrville. Again, services at 8:30 on Sunday morning and at 11. And we're going to close with a gospel song by Elvis Presley, picked out by Misty Dawn. So let's do it now. I'm Ted Davis. He's Pastor Tim Radkey. We'll see you next week on Rappin' with the Rev.